Now, this is Tuesday, that's 22nd of December 2020. This is part A of the world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street, created and maintained by the Khoodeelaar campaign, part of the movement defending the community in the East End of London by following, upholding, observing and advocating universal values of ethics and morality and accountability and answerability with universal application of integrity and honesty. These are easily accessible in terms of the basic definition of these words and these terms. And we actually practice these, all of these. Now, the Daily Mail, it claims to be the daily newspaper of the year. Apparently, it has been called the daily newspaper of the year. Of course, in that kind of boast, there is no evidence as to what this daily newspaper of the year claim is based on. So it doesn't follow that the fact that it is called daily newspaper of the year that it does tell the true news. And the daily newspaper of the year doesn't mean the same as the ordinary meaning of the word daily newspaper should mean, meaning that the newspaper concerned should be telling the truth. It never is the case with the Daily Mail. It doesn't tell the truth. Daily Mail, because of the comparative kind of circulation position it has compared to the, let's say, Beaverbrook legacy of toxicity, the Daily Express, or the dirty Rupert Murdoch owned and controlled Daily, the scum, the Sun, the Daily Mail has been the most effective perpetrator of lying and lies. And it has been the organ that has lied the most and most irresponsibly in peddling the prejudices and lies and hatred against the, quote, foreigner. And it's mainly targeted the categories of foreigners. One, generally, foreigners coming from the continents of Africa and Asia. And the other is the foreigners from Africa and Asia, but who are Muslims. And this is part of an agenda that has been created by the descendants of the Crusade. And they launched this new variant of anti-Muslim hatred by launching Saitan Rushdie in the late 1980s. And Saitan Rushdie was used to incite hatred generally against Muslims. So the Daily Mail has been at the forefront of all of that. And it has been also responsible for the brainwashing of the most numbers, if you like, of the Little Englander gullibles, that is, people who are prone to be brainwashed and zombified and stooged. Now, for the last kind of 4 or 5 years, the Daily Mail has been boasting about Britain taking back control after the overhyped and completely falsely, dishonestly procured vote for Brexit in June 2016. 16, that Britain would take back control. Now, today's Daily Mail, 22nd of December 2020, is not boasting, and is not even kind of showing any remorse for lying all this time. And this headline we are all heading for, Tier 4, means nothing, because it doesn't relate to this headline, the words in the headline, this splash. That the failures are the failures of the Boris Johnson-fronted cabal, which the Daily Mail furiously peddled and promoted over the Brexit of the last 5 years. And Boris Johnson has been exposed every day as being engaged in contradictory, completely unreliable, falsely scripted, misleading, and untruthful peddling and promotion of measures that really don't kind of relate to one another, because there have been several conflicting measures promoted by Boris Johnson and his so-called cabinet. For example, the two cabinet ministers in the last kind of week have been making contradictory, conflicting kind of statements about the virus, and the worst kind of behavior, the irresponsibility, has been placed at the door of Gavin Williamson, who is supposedly minister at the expense of schools. He compelled the London Borough of Greenwich to keep the schools open when the London Borough of Greenwich wanted to shut the schools because of the increase in the number of the virus infections. Now, less than a week later, the virus is spreading, and it is spreading to an extent where the Daily Mail is saying, underneath this main heading, we are all heading for Tier 4. Science chief's warning, as Whitty says, COVID hospital cases will reach peak by New Year, peak that was reached by the virus earlier this year, in April earlier this year. So that's what he's saying underneath that. Science chief is saying that. Now, when we say diagnosis of Fleet Street, we mean examining the contents and the evidence and the role of the Fleet Street papers embodied by the Daily Mail. By looking at the immorality, the lack of ethics and compassion, and the lack of rigor and substance in the contents and the coverage and the role of all of that by the Fleet Street papers. And our purpose is to protect the rights and the needs and the entitlements of the people who are supposedly the citizens of this country and are entitled to protection, and most of all entitled to the truth. Now, the last year, let's say starting in the kind of middle or the end of February 2020. So this is now, let's say, 11 months. And in the 11 months, the Daily Mail has lied for Brexit, as well as on the COVID-19. And the racist the racist hatred against the world outside of this island. Because as we have said, one of the things that the Daily Mail does and the rest of the Fleet Street actually follows is that they don't recognize, they quite literally don't recognize the existence of the world outside of Britain. Britain is a very small island. And yet they reverse the whole thing, they twist it beyond linguistic sustainability and evidential sustainability, and make the small British island bigger in impact and implication than the whole of the rest of the world. And that is what lies underneath the claim, taking back control. Whoever coined that stupid phrase, Britain could never take back control without the world, without the help of the world. And the world has always been dependent on its various component countries and societies and parts. The Daily Mail doesn't recognize the threat to the environment. The Daily Mail doesn't recognize the threat to the health of the people generally, even when there was no pandemic of the kind that we are experiencing now. That pollution and environmental pollution and other things cause to the health. The Daily Mail has been in denial, absolutely in denial of the correlation between the corruption at the heart of the Conservative government, corruption at the heart of the local councils, and the impact on the health and the welfare and the well-being of the people affected by the decisions made by the crooks in the councils, in the government departments. For example, let's say that Keir Starmer, when he was the Director of Public Prosecutions, or DPP, in post, he was in post throughout most of Theresa May's reign as the Home Secretary. Now, Keir Starmer, who is now the leader of the Labour Party in Parliament, Keir Starmer issued, as he was retiring after 5 years, the normal kind of length of time that an individual holds the post of the Director of Public Prosecutions normally. As he was about to retire from that post, he confirmed, Keir Starmer confirmed, a series of rules and regulation changes at the Crown Prosecution Service, which is kind of topped by the Director of Public Prosecution. And he did that to penalize, to punish, to increase the penalties against people in poverty. And he called them benefit cheats, but they were not benefit cheats. In the main, there were people denied basic welfare benefits because of poverty and ill health. So Keir Starmer is now the leader of the opposition, and it is not a surprise that there is hardly anything that Starmer has said and been reported by Fleet Street or the mainstream media broadcasting outlets like the BBC or the Sky News or ITV or Channel 4 News about the additional impact on the lives and welfare of the well-being of the people caused by the virus and caused by the failing government fronted by Boris Johnson. Now, how dire is the comparison between taking back control and this two-word phrase run by the Daily Mail. Now, the pariah Britain is described as, based on the more than 40 countries banning British flights, British aeroplanes going from out of Britain into other countries. And the list has 46 nations and countries. How world turned back on UK. How absolutely stunningly different is this headline and this admission. And yet they are still kind of brazenly Brexiteering, even in this edition of the Daily Mail. And we shall be looking at that. And it's saying that the new COVID strain may pass more easily between children, and that hotspot hospitals are on the brink. That is, they're completely about to collapse. And the corrupt Daily Mail is still blaming migrants for the ills of this country. Because the headline says food price fears over migration. That is the complete opposite of the copy underneath it in the twister lying Daily Mail. It is saying that Neil Parish MP, the chair of the Select Committee, said, if British farmers and food producers cannot get the workers they need, we all risk higher food prices or more cheap imports. How totally dishonest. And the twisting continues. The report about the conviction of the lorry driver who drove 39 migrants, Vietnamese migrants, who died. The headline is killed by greed. It's not killed by greed. It's killed by the greed of the driver and the lunacy and the racist disregard for the safety of these people. But killed by greed doesn't attach to him. It suggests that the victims of the massacre, which is what it was, were the ones who were greedy. They were not greedy at all. They were desperate. And it says desperate in the subheading underneath it, but it doesn't say that in the main heading. Now there is a stupid, typical Daily Mail piece by a thing called Ross Clark, who is saying French threats and why we must grow British and take control of the food we eat. How stupid. If we could do that, why haven't been food produced in Britain for centuries? So this is the kind of lunacy that is exposing people to the failed system And there is a piece in the Daily Mail saying that the child of Nazanin Zaghari Radcliffe is pleading to Boris Johnson to bring her mom home from Iran. Now that's a kind of confession by the Daily Mail, but it's a confession without blaming Boris Johnson for causing Nazanin to suffer additional prison term in Iran. If Britain was capable of taking back control, how is it that Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe has not been brought back to Britain? What happened with the diplomacy? And the answer is that Boris Johnson is discriminating against this woman. And he was reckless about her safety, and he is discriminating against this woman. This is Tabit. This is the propaganda promotion for the corrupt, absolutely corrupt Norman Tebbit, racist criminal. He is a cruel man and a corrupt person, and he is one of the worst racists in British politics. And he is one of the reasons why the racist hatred against the rest of the world perpetuates in this country. And the Daily Mail is very much a part of that same agenda, the same narrative, the same outlook. And they are the problems that have been causing thousands of people to suffer ill health or worse. Now, the Times says that mutant virus is everywhere. More areas must face toughest restrictions to fight the new strain, chief scientist warns. And there is a short brief at the bottom of page 1, which says the fishing compromise, that Britain has tabled a Brexit compromise on fishing that could break an impasse with the EU over the compensation of quotas for Europe's fleet are severely cut in future. Now, if Britain, even in brief, puts in a compromise proposal, then that is the opposite of taking back control, isn't it? So it says in the detail on page 2 of the same item, Britain has tabled a compromise on fishing that could break a deadlock over compensation if quotas for Europe's fleet are severely cut in future. The proposals are thought to offer more protection for existing fish quotas and offer a compensation mechanism for reductions after a phased transition. Whatever the length of the phase of the transition, this actually represents the opposite of the boastful Britain taking back control. And the Times has got a more accurate or factual kind of headline about the murderers of the 39 Vietnamese migrants. It says guilty. Gang who let 39 smuggled migrants suffocate in container. That is more accurate, but not fully accurate. And there is Despite the comparative kind of accuracy, by the Times, it is still containing too many contradictory items on the virus all over the place. Absolutely contradictory. Because it is saying that school should be kept open. How is this possible? If mutant virus is everywhere, then how should the schools be kept open? Why? And how is that going to help? So the stupidity is absolutely